Chapter 16. More about macrocosmic activities in the microcosm. With the identification of Saturn as the highest manifestation upon a visible plane of Akashic activity, the way is made plain for us to read God's handwriting in the heavens, where he plainly discloses the whole scheme of creation, the descent of spirit into matter through the gradually increasing density of the same, primarily simple, elements ever growing more complicated by repeated permutations as they become more gross. This is the secret of the fact that the chemistry of all parts of space is the same. But the puzzle of the scientist in all his investigations is the ever-recurring Akasha, the neutral point, the Sushumna, into which all activities disappear or merge. He calls it usually X. That is unknown, hence the X-ray. And the gamma ray of radium is thus classed. The ether of science is the grossest manifestation of Akasha, though Blavatsky says that on our plane, for us mortals, it is the seventh principle of the astral light, and 3 degrees higher than radiant matter. In Jupiter, the predominant Tattva is Fayu, next in order to Akasha. When near together, Jupiter and Saturn disturb each other more than do any other planets. As there must be a close affinity between ether and air, this is exactly what we should expect. But were it not for the vast space separating Jupiter from Mars, double the ratio of that between other planets, according to Bode's symmetrical law of progression, there would be even greater disturbances when these 2 planets approach each other. As it is, the violent impact of their predominant Tattvas, air and fire, is the cause of thunder. The severity and prevalence of thunderstorms depends upon their aspects one to another. Examined through a large telescope, the Tattvic activities in Jupiter's globe present a beautiful picture of varied and changing color, olive greens and purple mingling with the more predominant brown, red, and yellow. Although well-defined zones of reddish clouds, Tejas vibrations stretch around the sphere parallel with Jupiter's equator. All these masses display the peculiarities of clouds, as in our Earth atmosphere of air, moving with varying velocity in strong aerial currents and constantly changing their relative positions. The equatorial belt itself, brilliantly lemon-hued or sometimes ruddy, shows Prithvi, and the region is sprinkled over with balloon-shaped white masses which are naturally apers. These move faster than the dark and brighter-hued masses. The famous great red spot, of vast dimensions, is an exception to the other evanescent phenomena. For, though changing hue from time to time, its stability of position has been an important aid to the astronomer in ascertaining not merely data concerning Jupiter, but important facts in physics. The rapidity of changes upon the surface of the planet indicate to the scientist a temperature not much short of incandescence. We who know the qualities of the Tattvas can recognize the source of this as the Tejas of the Great Red Spot, the next Tattva evolved after Fayu. Towards the poles of the planet, the pure Jupiter vibration Fayu is seen in a vast expanse of blue and blue-gray. When favorably placed in a nativity, the influence of Jupiter promotes a fortunate and honored life, and therefore he has been called the god of fortune. Seen with the naked eye, the planet is a beautiful object, shining with a silvery white light, and it was so placed during the winter of 1906-7 that no cloudless nights could possibly be very dark. On moonless nights, Jupiter may cast a shadow on the snow. Astrologically considered, Jupiter represents the temperate, moist element in nature, its special function being to disintegrate and help to germinate. That is, to promote change in all things visible. And this we know to be the special attribute of Fayu, motion, tireless, ceaseless motion, for which Akasha is ever at hand providing the space. The color and number of Jupiter's 4 moons is further corroboration of the Tattvic law. There are 2 blue satellites and 1 red and 1 yellow. The Apus Tattva in the Jupiter atmosphere would reflect blue just as a body of water on the Earth reflects the blue of an azure sky above it. Thus the Jupiter system reflects the law of system within system, every truity of which manifests the whole law. The characteristics of Mars, in which Tejas predominates, have always been so striking that there is a gratifying agreement in all speculations, records, and legends concerning the planet. There is great antagonism between Mars and Venus, as why should there not be since water extinguishes fire? Therefore, to secure a measure of stability, our Earth comes between these natural enemies as a pacificator. And this greater planetary stability is reflected in the tattvic changes in our bodies, which are smoother, more harmonious and imperceptible, flowing from Tejas into Prithvi and then into Apus than could be the case if Apus came next to Tejas. Fevers and chills, blushing, and sudden waves of upheaving discord flowing through the body are all manifestations of disorder in the flow of the Tattvas, but more especially of Tejas. And always the remedy is to face the situation no matter what the cause with mental poise and confidence. Directing, as long as the disturbance lasts, frequent repetitions of the exercise in alternate breathing, and regularly inhaling deep, full, rhythmic breaths. Remember that for all chilly conditions the held breath is most efficacious. It may be repeated, with concentration mainly upon the feet and the solar plexus, till perspiration is induced. Through a telescope, Mars displays white at the polar caps, but the ardent, fiery orb appears, even to the naked eye when favorably situated for observation, of a reddish or orange hue. The fiery strength of Tejas vibrations, called into increased activity by all emotion and by intense feeling and by love, have always been recognized as stimulating the passions of man to strife and war. Hence Mars was the god of war. During the rare periods of peace in old Rome, all the panoply and pageantry of war, including the gorgeous red mantles, were treasured in the temple of Mars. The planet Mars is said to be always an enemy of Mercury. But this is the evil aspect of Mars, the contentious state of the planetary vibrations, the law of the rhythmic breath, which struggle against the higher and purer conditions of the Mercury influence. These are felt by all human beings in the proportion that they permit themselves to be swayed by passion and excitement without restraint of reason and will. Even so-called just indignation injects disorder, disturbing the rhythm and harmony of tattvic activities within, and should be shunned. When fortunately placed at birth, the influence of Mars gives to a character earnestness, patience, determination, and courage combined with gentleness. But the cruel, tyrannical, unjust man, always quarrelsome and often a vain boaster, is under the influence of Mars' most malefic vibrations. He is his own worst enemy, but unfortunately makes an atmosphere of unhappiness wherever he may be. He can win his freedom only through self-conquest, and that is what his free will is for. I must insistently reiterate that every human being has the power to choose between the tattvic vibrations which may thrill him with harmony or rend him with discord. The rays of certain tattvic states will be reflected only when the surface is akin. Our thoughts govern that and attract to us our affinities. If we think passion and hate, Tejas is ever ready to supply the fuel. Every exhibition of ungoverned passion in man is a microcosmic cyclone, the path of whose destruction is limited only by the chances of environment. Although the Earth, the most important planet to us, is commonly ignored in considering the planetary correspondences with the Tattvas, and the source of the Prythivic current has been severally attributed to the Sun, Mercury, and Jupiter. I deem this not merely short-sighted, but a grave error, the only rational solution of which is that it was done in the first place as a blind reason me. Blavatsky assigns for many puzzles. To do this is to take the Earth out of its orbit, so to speak, and make of it an exception to the law. It is but logical to believe that as the Akashic current emanates in greater force from Saturn, and the Fayu from Jupiter, so does also the Rhythmic current emanate as the ruling Tattva from our Mother Earth. If we accept this as proved through the invariability of natural law, it explains perfectly the reason for the preponderating flow of Prithvi in our pranal life currents. See Chapter 13. It is the Tattva of our environment, and in its normal flow puts us and holds us in sympathy with that environment. Now, please do not ask me how you are to know when this Tattva, or any other special one, is flowing normally or is disturbed. I have described the varied activities and effects of the different Tattvas within the human entity with much more detail than has ever been before attempted. I have analyzed them as only long study and unceasing practice and experiment could enable one to do, and I gladly give to you the benefit of my research expressed as fully and as clearly as love for the task and enthusiasm of purpose can do it. I cannot, however, supply the application and the perseverance individually needed before you can make this detail your own. Without the exercise of these faculties, you can never hope to gain a practical knowledge of the Tattvas. It is not a thing that can be poured over you in words, mere words. You must think yourself. Remember what I told you in an early chapter, that the Hindu teacher never imparts any fact to a student which by long meditation he can find out for himself. It is not by once reading, but only after many readings and much thinking that you can reasonably expect to master the mass of detail contained in these chapters. The difficulty being the greater because the subject is to most readers absolutely novel. But it is only by thus mastering it that anyone can make a personal application of this law of life. When our feet press the earth, we receive the strongest and purest vibrations of Prithvi, which is the secret of the exhilaration we feel when we can get into the real country, and of the benefit to nerves and soul derived from long country tramps. This fact also discloses the deep philosophy of Father Neep's barefoot treatment. In the early morning, before the day's struggle and conflict have generated discord, this especially in large communities where human beings are herded closely, the vibrations are at the highest state of harmonic activity, and when the feet tread the dew-wet grass, the double benefit is gained of receiving the two most favorable tattvas in their freshest and most refined, highly electrified states. On our planet, the Prithvi vibrations are negative to Tejas, Mars, and positive to Apis, Venus. Thus water is negative to the earth. Most dwellers in large cities, where the earth is for the most part solidly encased in stone and brick and asphalt, are grievously handicapped, for it is seldom that their feet come in direct contact with Mother Earth. The efficacy of mud baths is derived from the earth vibrations, but like benefits can be obtained by encouraging in more congenial ways the flow of Prithvi. The planetary influence of Venus upon terrestrial life is very important as the Apis Tattva, which predominates in that near and brilliant planet, is the unifying element that gives to organized matter its quality of stability. In dry seasons, all the green things of Earth suffer, and many of them quickly fade and perish because Mars unites with the Sun to divert or absorb the cooling and refreshing Apis vibrations from Venus, and their own rays increase proportionally in fervor and burning power. As 5/6 of the human body is composed of water, it is of the utmost importance that opportunity be given for the fullest normal play of the Apis Tattva. And this, you will remember, requires that the lowest cells in the lungs be filled. Tight lacing inhibits this absolutely, as it holds the lower lobes of the lungs in a vice-like grip, and usually it prevents anything approaching a free movement of the diaphragm. The practice is slow suicide. Yet women revive the iniquitous custom as at present whenever fashion gives the command. The stability of apers is recognized in that manifestation of prana which is known as fiona, the force which, during life, keeps the whole body in shape and resists the breaking down and disintegration of its tissues. Next to the deprivation of fresh air, perhaps the most prolific source of human ills is from stinting the body in its supply of pure water inside and out. As a rule, those who drink water most freely take it when they should not, with their meals, when the important digestive fluids need to be undiluted in order to put in their fine work. The greatest benefit derived from visits to famous European quays is due not half so much to the special virtue of the mineral water as to the fact that for several weeks the business of life is the drinking of water in quantities limited only by the ability to swallow it. If people formed the habit of drinking pure water freely between meals and, especially, the last thing at night and the first thing in the morning, they would not need to take the cure. Water is the mystical symbol of the soul because it is ever chemically pure. While it is the great solvent, it is also the absolvent and purifier, for whatever of foulness it takes up is held in suspension and can be eliminated by distillation, and thus it is with the soul. Its saving is the choice of freeing itself from the passions and errors of the material, sense life. The pure, self-controlled soul and the physical body wherein it dwells, whichever and always reflects the power controlling it, are alike freed from the coma and the impurity of unfavorable planetary vibrations which sow discord and incite to evil. Never lose sight of the fact that the sun is the source of the pranic, or life current, which contains in itself all the tattvas. But the variations in the proportions of the tattvas injected into the life current come from the planetary currents, in every one of which the ruling tattva of the planet predominates. It is interesting to know that the spectrum of Venus shows the presence of watery vapor. Thus it is that the activities of the macrocosm are reflected in the microcosm. It is in the pulmonary manifestation of prana that the tattvic condition of the vital currents can be most indisputably ascertained. For every tattva throws the elastic spongy cells of the lungs into the from of its characteristic vibration. Thus when the apus tattva is prevalent, the cells expand in crescent-like shape. When Tejas predominates, they are triangular, and with Fayu, spherical. And various modifications of these geometrical forms indicate the tattvic permutations. The test suggested for examining these is to hold a brilliant surfaced mirror before the mouth to intercept the exhalations. The vapor as it condenses upon the cool surface will take the form of the vibration dominant at the moment, and it can be best seen by another person looking over the shoulder of the one whose breath is under examination, as of course these vapor cells are extremely evanescent. We have now identified the planetary correspondencies with all the tattvas, and there yet remains the smallest and swiftest of the heavenly host, Mercury, who yields nothing in importance to the more brilliant and better known orbs. He is the bond of union, and truly the messenger of the gods. How he performs this office I shall try to make plain in the next chapter. Chapter 17. Mercury and the activities of the Sushumna. Hermes, as the messenger of God, reveals to us his paternal will, and developing in us intuition imparts to us knowledge. The knowledge which descends into the soul from above excels any that can be attained by the mere exercise of the intellect. This quotation from the Neoplatonist Proclus is a most fitting introduction to our study of the influence of the planet Mercury, called by the Greeks Hermes, upon human life. For by the illuminating light of the tattvic law we are able to remove the statement from the realm of mere speculation, to which it has been indulgently relegated for centuries, and to feel convinced of the intuitional truth embodied in the ancient Greek thought. All scientific data concerning the planet Mercury, as well as the fables and ancient myths connecting planet and God, are strictly in harmony with what I believe to be Mercury's 185-186, the law of the rhythmic breath activities and influences, whether heavenly or terrestrial. Briefly reviewing the first mentioned, we learn that as a stellar body, Mercury is exceptional in many ways, and has always baffled the astronomer in his efforts to obtain accurate data concerning its constitution and environment. It is the smallest planet in diameter but the swiftest in motion, has the least mass but the greatest density, being 2 1/4 times denser than the Earth, and only slightly less dense than the metal Mercury, is nearest to the Sun and has the most eccentric orbit. As seen from the Sun, Mercury passes through one constellation of the zodiac in a fraction over 7 days, completing the circuit of the zodiac in 88 days. And as seen from the Earth, it makes 3 complete circuits of the Sun in 348 days. Also from our point of view, the planet is usually in the same constellation with the Sun, and is never farther away than a nearby sign. The astronomer considers it more than doubtful if Mercury has any atmosphere, and it has no satellite. When it can be observed in the same telescopic field with Venus, its totally different constitution is plainly betrayed by its markedly lower albedo, or reflecting power. For Mercury appears as zinc or lead, contrasted with the dazzling silver-white radiance of Venus. Now, I should like you to remember, in this connection, that wherever or whenever the Apus Tattva most prevalent in Venus can be isolated, it is recognized by its glistening silvery whiteness. It is said to impart a silvery edge to the human aura. I wish I knew how many of my readers could answer the question. What are the 3 principal nadis in the physical body? Those who cannot would better reread chapter 12. And fix firmly in their minds the names and offices of the great main reservoir and conduits of life force. You will understand perfectly then that the Pingala, on the right side of the spine, is the conduit of the solar current, positive, and the Ida, on the left side, of the lunar current, negative. And, therefore, these nadis correspond respectively with the Sun and the Moon and are influenced by their activities. With what does the Sushumna, in which the 2 currents meet, correspond? In our study of planetary relations and influences, we have traced the correspondence of the organic activities in the human body with the whole solar system, and the truth of the old Greek aphorism, as it is above, so is it below, has been made to us a living reality. When once your attention is drawn to the fact, you will constantly come upon proof that to many ancient people this was a familiar truth. Bacon says the ancient styled man, a little world in himself. Now, the correspondence of the constellations of the zodiac and the planets with all the organs of the human body through its nervous system is but the microcosmic reflection of the vast system of cosmic vibrations. Therefore, in the solar system we must find the cosmic Sushumna in which the solar and lunar currents meet. In the progress of the human soul, in its evolution, its growth and development, there is nothing more important than the office of the Sushumna. Consequently, it is inconceivable that it has not a cosmic prototype of equal importance to the solar system. In the gloaming, at dawn and at twilight, the solar and lunar currents meet in the cosmic Sushumna. The identification of Mercury as this Sushumna of the macrocosm makes perfectly clear and comprehensible all the dignities, attributes, and influences which legend and fable have conferred upon the planet, both actually and symbolically, and explains many of the characteristics that have puzzled the astronomer. No other planet possesses any attributes that connect it with the office of the Sushumna. Again, giving precedence to known facts, our first clue is that Mercury is in the closest cosmical relation to the Sun. Indeed, So close is it that only the patient observer who keeps in touch with the movements of the planet and knows when and where to look for it ever sees it. There is a tradition that the eyes of Copernicus were never gratified by the sight of this swift solar attendant. In the latitude of New York and neighboring states, for about a fortnight during its greatest eastern elongation from the sun, Mercury can be seen in the early twilight just before its setting. And for a like period when the planet is west of the sun, rising before the orb of day, it can be seen in the early dawn. During the first weeks of December 1906, Mercury was a morning star and was seen in close companionship with Venus. These neighboring planets were in Scorpio, and only 2 signs to the southwest, in Virgo. The crescent of the waning moon was in conjunction with Mars. The spectacle was unforgettably beautiful, worth many early risings to enjoy. It was a reminder, also, that both esoterically and astrologically, Mercury and Venus are considered spiritual affinities, while Mars and Saturn are thought to have a close physical sympathy. This latter may be beneficial or harmful according as the physical is kept under subjection and subordinated to its divinely planned office as a perfectly fitted vehicle for the soul's activities, or is given free rein and stifles all higher interests. Now, Mercury is the unifying element between the several principles of man as between the Tattvas. The strife the planet ouses is that it is ever impelling upward and resists downward tendencies. It is Mercury's rod that pricks the conscience and would ever extend its support in the struggle against wayward impulses. When you fully understand the entire office of the Sushumna, this will be quite plain. Both the density and the swiftness of Mercury are accounted for, or explained, by the tattvic state of prana when in the Sushumna. Of course it is the same in the macrocosm as in the microcosm, only on a vaster scale. Though apparently quiescent during the moment of conjunction, the quiescence is but seeming. The concentrated energy of the Tattvas through their closely compacted atoms in the united currents as they meet in the Sushumna produces a state of extreme density. During concentration, when alone the higher office of the Sushumna is called into activity, the velocity of the vibrations is stimulated to an inconceivable speed. 6 months after this study of Mercury's influences was first set in type, I had the extreme gratification of finding the following corroboration of my belief. Alchemists knew Mercury has to be ever near Isis, the moon, as her minister, as without Mercury neither Isis nor Osiris, the sun, can accomplish anything in their great work. Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, page 388. Curiously enough, we have in the rise of Mercury in a thermometer a perfect symbol of the rise of the vital force in the Sushumna. For the state of increased activity and density and vastly increased velocity is also one of rising temperature. The spinal Sushumna, which we have now specially to consider, is a hollow canal in the center of the spinal cord. In ordinary persons who are absorbed in trivialities and purely material interests, it is closed at the base, the point of union between the Pingala and Ida, where the residual nervous action, the memory of sensations, is stored in the sacral plexus. This canal is the so-called occult channel of prana, through which, when roused to activity, the coiled-up latent prana, or kundalini, ascends from the sacral plexus to the brain, and striking upon the pituitary body, the will energizer, stimulates it to such activity that it in turn kindles the spiritual fire of the pineal gland. The first hint the student has that he is rousing this slumbering power is a sensation of warmth in the basic plexus, the mouldry of the yogi, where it is coiled up. And as the soul-governed will controls prana and holds it to the ascent through the canal, the heat increases. All aspirations for higher things, all exhortation of prayer and worship, tend to set free a minute portion of this kundalini, the coiled up one. Thus, you see, the path to the mystic realm of the undiscovered leads through the Sushumna. We enter it in meditation, often unknowingly. It is traversed by many a rapt enthusiast, and by the ardent inventor who wrests nature's secrets from her vast repositories. Intuitional truths are never discovered elsewhere. Swami Vivekananda says, "Wherever there is any manifestation of what is ordinarily called supernatural power or wisdom, there must have been a little current of kundalini which found its way into the Sushumna." The data concerning Mercury's close association with our spiritual natures is practically without limit, as he who begins to search will find. The symbol of the planet expresses the Trinity or three in one, the circle representing the spirit be cause without beginning or end. The crescent is the reflection, or soul, the negative of the spirit as is the moon of the sun. And the cross typifies the four elements of the physical, or gross, plane of activity. There are four elemental divisions, called the triplicities, of the zodiac, and Mercury's influence in the varying signs is distinct. The astrologer Hazelrig finds all the planetary symbols equally significant with that of Mercury, and believes known to be arbitrary signs, which is in agreement with all occult teaching. In all ancient lore, we find Mercury accredited as ruling the mind. Everywhere in myth and story he is sent as the interpreter and messenger to the understanding and reason of man. Even the thievish disposition attributed to Mercury symbolized the facility with which reason and understanding appropriate all knowledge. The very term thought is said by Anna Kingsford to be the Egyptian equivalent for Hermes, the god thought, frequently written Thoth, these being for the Greeks and Egyptians the personification of the divine intelligence, that is, his messenger. The same spirit was manifested to the Hebrew as Raphael, like Hermes called the physician of souls, and to the Hindu as Buddhi. One of the chief glories of Hermes was his conquest of the hundred-eyed Argus, which denotes Mrs. Kingsford says, the victory of the understanding over fate. For Argus represents the power of the stars over the unenfranchised soul. This corroborates what I have constantly endeavored to make emphatic, that the power of human thought guided by reason can change the planetary currents. The powers of reason and understanding to which Mercury guides us are above mere cold intellection. It is the stifling of pure reason by the exaltation of the human sense-governed mind that produced the rank materialism which has marked recent decades and from which higher thought is freeing the race of mankind. The Roman name Mercury, by which we designate the planet, comes from merx, merchandise. Their god was of a much more material and sordid character than the Greek Hermes with whom they identified him, which betrays the truth that the people had degenerated and become more material. They chose to degrade Hermes, archangel, who bears the rod of knowledge by which all things in heaven and earth are measured, to a crafty, commercial god. The farther back we go, the more elemental, more spiritual are all the gods. Zeus is believed to have meant originally the glistening ether. Hindu genius spiritualizes its sense conceptions with wonderful readiness. The more remotely their myths are traced, the more atmospheric do they become. The more the god merges with the planet and its ensouling force. A concluding word as to practice. When our wills hold our minds in check and thus restrain the scattering of forces through wasteful and, oftener than not, discordant activities, the pranic currents flow rhythmically and gather force and strength as all the molecules of the body yield to the harmony and tend to move in the same direction, which means a tremendous gain in electric power. Only by the uplift of this conscious direction can we connect with the great central dynamo, the divine spirit. Thus the soul-directed thought is electrical, itself a ray of spiritual powers, the effectual energy of which is gauged by the steadfastness of purpose, the soul force which directs it. Never forget that the mind, which is the disturber and disorganizer, creating all discord, when brought under control, is the agent of our freedom. There is no limit to the power of thought.